Voilà, on a du son. Bonjour mesdames, bonjour messieurs, quelques instants.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our forum, Equip Auto 2023, dedicated to the evolution of parts and service distribution, is going to be starting very soon. So, a few words of welcome. I'm the coordinator of the conference and within the forum. A few words about the forum. More than 605 precisely, and Equip Auto is being renewed, reinvented, and while I can see or hear a lot of noise, which means that in fact this is a sign of success. That's what I can say so far. Villages are also present, while those that were present in 2022, but also, you know, the body and the parts. Then you have the tire village. This is celebrating the 130th anniversary of the tires, and then you have the reuse village, the car wash village also, and then you have the second-hand vehicles, the used vehicles. This is important for those who intend to sell parts and services. And then within this place, I mean this area, the conference area, and this area, those conferences are organized so that you can think about the future. And the next one, I mean the one we shall be hearing now, will be devoted to distribution in Europe. But tomorrow we have a forum starting from 11, and that would be devoted to the 2- and 3-wheel vehicles with an engine. So, and certainly with the idea that there might be a convergence with the automotive sector. And then in the afternoon there will be a very interesting forum on hydrogen. You will have answers to these questions you were not daring enough to even raise. So I'm not going to list all the 10 conferences, but well, the basic ideas are the sustainable development, innovation, technologies, because after all, auto is a matter of innovation. And then you have training. Training is crucial. This will be organized on Saturday, both for initial but also continuous training. Now, so we have also heard or seen Michelin, BAS, EV workshop or rather. So they have been extended trophies on the area of electric vehicles. So that's it for me, and I'm going to give the floor to both of you, Caroline and Muriel, to speak about this distribution session. Well, Emmanuel, you have in fact taken us 4 minutes. Yes, but I shall give you back those 4 minutes. So, good afternoon. We are going to devote 1 hour and a half to talk about distribution of parts and services, with the idea to be able to come up with the necessary investment to lend support to the operators today and in the future. So then you have the issue of electrification, digitalization, so they need to get organized. You know that the fleet is aging in Europe, but they still get to be prepared to cope with the need for electrification. And we are pleased to have a quorum of players. So these are those are the speakers, in fact. So the first theme, talking about the stakes involved in distribution in Europe, the first issue is consolidation and the emergence of giant players in that area. Stéphane, Christophe Rollet.
Comme vous voulez. Alors attendez, comme il n'y a rien d'affiché, Stéphane Antiglio, président de
Stefano,
Europe,
Holding Europe, Christophe, Director General, well, in fact, CEO. Then Guy-Olivier, IAM activities within MOTRIO, Filip from the Belgium Federation. And I would like to invite our first keynote speaker to give us the big picture. Hugues Archambault, the Bridge Corporate Finance founder. So thank you all. Let's start immediately. Hugues, stand up. You're not entitled to have a seat for the time being. Hugues, can we very quickly give an overview of what is taking place in Europe in the area of distribution? Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hugues Archambault. I'm the founder of the Bridge. In fact, an institution accompanying SMEs in their external growth projects, and that's the reason why I would like to talk about what I've been doing over the past years, that is helping companies to consolidate their markets. So maybe a few words about this market. When we say after sales in Europe, this represents 1/4 of the global market. So half of that market is occupied by the retailers and the repairers. So the 45,000 distributors, well, you have a market of 100 billion euros, which is quite impressive. The concentration level of which, in fact, varies significantly. If you consider what's happening in the northeast of Europe, well, unfortunately, the slides are not moving fast enough. Well, anyway, if you look at what's happening in the north-west of Europe, in particular with the larger market for Germany and France, and which also happen to be the most consolidated, the three first IAM players account for 2/3 of the domestic market, which obviously, I mean, you're familiar with the French players, PHAE, Alliance, ELP, who are the three first players in France. If you look at the two markets, Italy and Spain, it's in fact the reverse. Less than 20% of those markets are, in fact, the market of the three first players. So in other words, none of the players account for 10% of the IAM market in those two countries. Now, this means that there is still room for consolidation in the southern part of Europe, but this is also true for Europe as a whole. The fact is that 25% of the overall market is under the control of three players. So then, if you look at the ranking, well, you might think that it is always the same. It's not exactly that. Three players have been organically growing. I mean, the core growth has been, in fact, significant. And the first one is Intercars. Intercars, which is the second largest player in Europe. So, in fact, replacing Alliance. And then you have AUTO which actually illustrates the importance of e-commerce in that field. And the third, AUTO Partner, a Polish company, 200 million euros in turnover. So what is interesting about the after-sales market is that it's not a matter of external growth. You can also grow, I mean, from growth through what is known as the core growth. So what is the current state of consolidation? I've been looking at what's been happening over the past, since 2009. So those distributors with more than 100 million euros, 50 of them, and have in fact been transferred or sold. So the financial investors didn't buy 1/4 of them. So they are, let's say, tricky. They know that there is a potential for consolidation, and they knew that they can have a return on investment, because in fact the idea for them is to buy and then sell at a higher price. And the first wave of consolidation took place between 2011 and 2018 with LKQ in the UK. So then you have 3 years because without nothing happening with the COVID, and the major consolidators in fact had to take time to consolidate, integrate, digest the companies they have bought. Then 8 new operations with more than 100 million euros have been noted, but with 2023 this trend was not confirmed. So what I would say is that they are deep-seated trends, which might be different from what happened in the past, but still this trend is there. When you buy a company, how much are you prepared to pay for that? How much do you pay? So you have the valuation multiple, the EBITDA. So this is based on the EBITDA. And if you consider the major strategic corporation, I mean those that have been conducted by major distributors and buying comparatively large companies, well, the multiple was quite high, 10.7 times the EBITDA over the past years. Now, then distributors, consumers, in fact, afterwards have been able to pay only, if I may put it this way, just 8.2%, so times rather the EBITDA. The distributors that have whose value was considered to be less than 50 million euros, in fact, compared to the EBITDA, it's between 5 and 8 times. So why this difference? What are the buyers looking for when they decide to buy another company? Another distributor company. First of all, that could be, in fact, the need to be present geographically. It could be because they would like to conquer new market, and it's also, in some cases, it's due to the fact that they would like to have, in fact, the different ranges of product being complementary, and, of course, know-how. And to that extent, I would like to say that when a company buys another company, the purpose is not necessarily to replace the leaders, existing leaders, but rather to rely on them and hoping that they will stay. Now, then you have another reason for buying a company, that's financial performance, that is growth, profitability, and cash generation. And then there are other reasons like the ability to have complementary ranges or cross-selling. Now, but having said all that, what is most important is geographical presence, complementarity of the range, and financial performance. Well, in fact, the real work starts after buying, that is integration. Without integration, if integration is not done properly, generally speaking, there is no return on investment for the buyer, or that return would be quite limited. LKQ, just to give an example, number one in Europe, whose presence results from acquisitions in the different European markets. Initially, they have been very aggressive to their detriment after having bought 80 companies in the 20 countries. In 2019, 2017, the organic growth, core growth was nil, and operational margin dropped by 10, under 10%, so dropped to 8%, which is in fact below what the management back in the US were expecting, and it was also below what their shareholders in the New York stock market was expecting. So they decided to launch one LKQ Europe, an integration program with the aim to reach a certain level of operational margins. They have focused on purchasing, so they focused on 130 suppliers, which helped them to gain 1 percentage point in margin. They also were able to have an incremental organic growth of more than 200 million euros. So different things were done by LKQ, and during the first half of 2023, they generated an organic growth higher than 9%, and operational margin was higher than 10%. So, have you almost finished? Well, what can we expect? Well, I think that consolidation will continue in Italy and Spain because it's fragmented, and the same applies to the UK. I mean, in the UK market, there is room for other consolidation processes. There will be medium or small acquisitions. You know, there are issues like succession issues, and there is a real appetite for those very much involved in consolidation. And then the reuse parts could be another segment. AUTO Cirque, for example, for the Nordic countries who broke into the French market. And what operations can we expect in the months or years to come? Well, quite obviously, GSN number 3 in the UK, that should be finalized. The sale of Europark, which is owned by an investment fund, and the fund is looking for liquidity. And then Stéphane, ANTIGLIO, do you expect PHE to enter the German market? So that might be of interest for, the German market might be of interest for PHE. Looking at the manufacturers, Emile Frey entered the French market. Well, will they continue to enter to develop in Europe? So they do have the means to do so. And last but not least, Stellantis, 30 billion euros in net cash. They're going to spend part of that cash to increase wages in the US because they have issues with the unions. They will also spend money for electrification, but LKQ is worth 15 billion euros, so I'm not, I think that there might be surprises. That's at least what I'm expecting. Thank you for listening.
Très rapidement, Alain LANDEC.
Alain LANDEC,
historien de cette assemblée. Vous pouvez nous rappeler
the historian here. Can you tell us, just in 30 seconds, how is it that distributors suddenly decided to grow outside their domestic market? Well, in fact, the first issue for them was to get recognized, to be recognized by equipment manufacturers. So those are large companies, and next to them, or facing them, in the 1960s or 70s, well, the distributors were regional, and they had to be recognized at a national level. So they started getting organized at a national level. In the Gros Franc, that was one of the very first distributors, so nobody remembers them, but in fact it's a grouping of regional distributors, and they join together, and they then become recognized by major players like Valeo. So this consolidation started with the national groupings of small companies. And then you have Group Auto. Those small companies got consolidated. And at the beginning of 2000, in fact, more groups were created. Now, at that stage, well, there have been other companies that were bought because of succession, auto distribution, and all of that were comparatively marginal. In Germany, well, the process was different. Instead of developing small groupings, they started with large companies. Müller, Strauss, well, they represented, in fact, another process different from what happened in France. So once this was done in France and in Germany, well, in fact, the sizes, company sizes were not large enough, in fact, to deal with companies like Bosch and others. And, well, basically in Germany, they thinking was that, in fact, they didn't have the right sizes. So they decided to establish companies like Auto Distribution International, ATR, and because there was a need for the equipment manufacturers to show that they do have a strategy to show to the German management that in France distribution is different. So they had to do so via getting organized at cross-border level. That was the first consideration process. How could they get recognized strategically speaking, but also to grow in terms of volume? With the idea, if you were recognized, then you could get, in fact, better purchasing conditions. TEMOT, for example, was able to develop partnerships with premium distributors on issues like marketing, so that the level of cooperation was higher. And I think that this was the main process. Having said this, later on, organizations were set up, including mine. When you have reached a certain level of development, the next question for you is either I disappear or I try and find the funding, necessary funding. And for that I need to think about a new way of, new forms of development. For example, industrial consolidation can be done. For example, that was the case with Alliance. So the initial idea, this was what was at the very beginning of the consolidation process. So can I have 15 seconds more? Yes, okay. Now, one more dimension is that the grouping via integration, they also became financial organizations. Once they have been recognized by the equipment manufacturers, they also needed to generate, profits, and this is important for the shareholders. So therefore, the current consolidation and the reasons are different from what prevailed at the beginning. Now, PHE manager, PHE top 3, you're present in 6 countries, and 1/3 of your business is done internationally. But question, why did you decide to grow outside the domestic market, and why did you decide to do so late?
Franchir les frontières, parce que de toute façon l'Europe maintenant est un marché ouvert.
Well, Europe is an open market now, and there is an issue of critical dimension, critical size. And then that the equipment manufacturers also got consolidated.
La concentration chez les distributeurs. Donc aujourd'hui, on a tout de même un rapport de force avec des.
So, well, you had to be able to actually be playing the same ground, frame field as the manufacturers. They are stronger than the distributors, as you know, and this is important to underscore. And at the European level, it is important to be recognized, to be represented. If you just stick to one country, well, you might be respected in your country, but if you are able to, in fact, have a sort of a European dimension, that would give give you more weight during discussions, during negotiations, in terms of data exchange, and so on and so forth. So our business is not just a matter of buying or purchasing. There are plenty of other things that have to be taken into account, and consolidation was therefore necessary. So PHE, which used to be called Auto Distribution. Auto Distribution has been through a difficult period. Consolidation does, in fact, require means. You need also to do all of that profitably. It's not enough to just turn away from your country or your market. It is important to maintain, to develop your domestic market, in our case in France, and we continue to do so. And France is a country we're very much focused on, but gradually we turn to other countries to try to undertake what I would call very nice endeavors. And then Germany, well, Hugues did refer to Germany. You went there, but that was slowly. Well, even going slowly, this means that you take time to select the road you want to go. Well, we started with Benelux countries, and we did meet different entrepreneurs. Our development, in fact, is linked to our encounter with entrepreneurs who share our values. It's not just buying a company. Well, in fact, in most cases, the previous leaders stayed within the company, invested in the company's capital, and after the Benelux countries, after that, we encountered Italian and Spanish entrepreneurs, and the day we meet German entrepreneurs, then certainly we'll be discussing. I can assure you, Caroline, on that. Alex Gelke was meant to be here. He was prevented from coming, but he wanted to meet, in fact, to speak on behalf of LKQ. Well, maybe a few words on what Hugues said. One LKQ as a concept. They had, I would say, they have revised that project downward to focus on the purchasing IT. Well, you know, Europe of spare parts, we so much dream of, well, did not exist, and therefore LKQ, in fact, is organized per regions. So, and the sales people would continue to lead their lives, if I may put it this way, and that's what actually LKQ has decided to get organized. He also told me that there is no such a thing as spare parts European-wide, but rather organized in a regional way. So, next question, do you think that LKQ can be overcome or not? Is there nobody is daring to say whether LKQ can be vanquished? Well, the question is not performing or replacing, in fact, LKQ. Everybody's trying to grow, trying to win market shares. In our case, it's not at all an obsession to take the place of LKQ. It's not because you are larger that you are necessarily performing better. We are trying to perform where we are present, where we are active. Coming back to the previous statement, I mean, what was said by MOTRIO, 2,500 garages are involved in MOTRIO, and Can you react to what was said about concentration and the way they were able to gain in terms of margins? Well, our approach is different. We're looking for a solution. Should we grow? I mean, via acquisition. Well, in fact, that would be useless if you cannot generate values. Just buying a company is not enough. Well, Spain, Italy, this is where I think there should be concentration that would be necessary for us to be able to provide services to our clients. But in fact, growth for the sake of growth is not our target.
And Renault sold one of its assets a few months ago because it was not it was a distributor, it was not our trade. But what is the role you want to assign a business against the background of your strategy? That's the main thing. That's the main thing, you see. Christophe, can you take over? 5 billion euros turnover, 660 points of sale for Point S in France. No stress with Point S. I thought it would be a good joke. So, for Point S, is that also very necessary to consolidate? Yes, absolutely. It's essential. Without repeating what was said, I think that everyone's consolidating. Car manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, wholesalers. But I think we have to accelerate that movement. In order to be a leader in your country, you have to find in other countries, you have to be in other countries, be competitive in other countries. Now, Point S, well, is different from some of the businesses of my sector here. Point S has always wanted, well, has wanted since 1992, to become more international. We understood we had to be in other European countries and then in elsewhere than Europe. We are now in 52 countries, and if a company wants to be able to remain among the leaders, it has to develop internationally to find more resources and more skills. We are present in Asia, and we developed tools, services, and products. Following ideas launched by our points of sale in Asia. We know that the automotive world is changing very quickly, and it gives you a wider vision when you are present internationally. There's another important point, harmonization. That's what LKQ is trying to do. Stéphane Antilio, do you think it is possible to duplicate offering and services in all countries? Can you have the same services, the same offers everywhere in all countries? Indeed, I would support what Christophe said. It's important that you can cross your experience, your expertise. You realize that there are things that are done in Spain, for example, that we could do in France, and there are things we do in France and our Spanish or Italian or Belgian colleagues can follow suit, get inspired by our experiments. As a distributor, we are striving for excellency, and we have logistical systems, logistical constructions. We have experimented in France, and we are progressively applying to all countries. You know, we are distributors, and we support. Our mission is to support repair shops, garage shops. So we are expanding garage and networks. AD is developing, is expanding in Belgium. We are also expanding that network in Italy, and the digital techniques that we are starting to implement in France can also be implemented in other countries. And we do it, but remaining faithful to the specificities of the different markets, because Europe is not just one market. People have different habits depending on the country, different structures, totally different purchase power. You have to remember that the average salary is different in France, in Spain. I'm not even talking about Central Europe. So you have to adjust. You have to adjust to the type of fleet, which can be more or less old, or which can focus on certain brands instead of others. So we have a sort of master plan, but a very flexible one at the same time. Christophe. Now, since you're such a big international company, can you still adapt to local specificities? Yes, we do. Yes, actually, I do support what Stéphane said. France is I think we are a leader. France is the precursor in terms of legal distributor. The problem is that when we go abroad, we remain quite French. But you see, what we tried to do was to see that Spain or Germany have a very different way of operating, and we need managers from the country to manage perhaps the French way, but by knowing really the country really deeply. And at Point S, one of our strong points is to have local people as managers in the different countries to adapt what has been successful in France, but to the local circumstances. What about the relationship with suppliers? Well, actually, it's quite paradoxical, because you could think that those are the distribution networks which are the least well organized internationally, but the parts and tires manufacturers are trying to implement European or international strategies, but the distributor often has to adapt to the manufacturer rather than the reverse. And I think that distributors can more easily adapt to a uniform policy than OEM manufacturers or car manufacturers. So the Europe of tires or the Europe of spare parts, is that a reality? Oh, it's not a mere fantasy, it is becoming a reality. We can invent new concepts to strive for profitability, because as Stéphane very aptly recalled, you're supposed to make money, and it's good to see that people have a nice opinion about you, but the best thing, the main thing is to make money. Do you think that the Europe of spare parts is a fantasy? Well, I think Renault decided to be present in IAM, and if you take a look at the organization of IAM, you only have 2 people coming from Renault. So we tried to spot the best skilled people in IAM. Now the Europe of tires already exists. When Christophe talks about it, that makes me smile, because 20 years ago tires were already rather European, and I think the distributor is more aware of the local requirements than a manufacturer who has a more global vision, or I'm going to close this session with Filip Ryan, who's the marketing director of Traxio. Well, Belgium is an interesting market because with a very mature and concentrated market, but are there still opportunities on that market? Yes, indeed, I was listened with a lot of attention to what was discussed, and this is a slide that we drew representing all the independent garages with different, which are part of the concept. And you find all the equipment manufacturers and distributors and importers on that graph, which gives you a pretty good overview. And I considered the development over 5 years of independent garages, and the numbers doubled in the last 5 years. So would you say that the market is mature? I don't think so. I think the Dutch market is well ahead of us in that respect. And there's a second point that plays in our favor. I think there will be a sort of side effect following the developments in the distribution contracts for dealers. And I always think about automobile distribution and repairs. I think that a lot more garages will become independent, will access that independent aftermarket, and that means there will be quite a lot of opportunities for equipment manufacturers and distributors who already are in control of the market. That will be an opportunity to widen their scope of work and get a better work share, a bigger share of the market. Now, our clock master is making, a lot of signs. I think it wants us to speak faster. Now, let's get to the nitty-gritty, the core of the business, but also the core of the service offer, because the idea is to adopt to an aging fleet and to a less favorable purchasing power. Now we're going to have to receive Flavien NEUVY, who is the director of the Cetelem Observatoire, who will quickly present. I'm saying that to please Emmanuel. No, he said to me that I would have to speak slower. Well, anyway. Now we'll now discuss the European car owners' budget. Wonderful study that was conducted and that Flavien will summarize. Now let me describe the economic situation of households, of car owners, talking about private people, private households. They're in dire straits with a very high inflation that we had not experienced in 40 years, but we have more structural effects which impact your business. I will share a few slides, but I will be very quick. Now, the first one is about the price of cars. We'll have a second slide. We had fun. Well, you must have fun when you undertake studies. They're not always funny, aren't they? So, the price of cars by kilograms. Yeah, when we're talking to manufacturers, we say, well, cars are more and more expensive. They say, yes, but they're better and better equipped. Okay, they're heavier and heavier. So we calculated the price per kilogram of car. And even if you consider the price per kilogram, the price of new cars, even considered that way, has not stopped increasing. And what happened in France is spectacular, even very impressive. On the left-hand side, you have 2001, the price of cars versus, so the price of cars is the light green. So before the price hike we've witnessed with scarcity of components, and you can see the dark green line. So actually, the price of new cars is increased twice as fast, 2.5 times faster than inflation. You know that cars have to be depolluted, and indeed it costs a lot and it has to be taken into account. But there's a decorrelation between inflation and the price of cars. And on the right-hand side, you have the development of prices from 2006 to until now. Has the price gone up faster than the revenue? We are at more 8% increase for revenue, but a lot more increase for new cars. So consequences, sales to private households has tremendously gone down on the G6, Germany, France, Italy, UK, Spain, Belgium. What is the percentage of households buying every year a new car? 2% for France. Spain is even less now, but it's interesting to compare with the 1970s figures. That meant that was 7%. Only 2.2% of private households bought a new car last year, then instead of 7% in the 70s. Actually, nobody buys a new car nowadays. It was 1.5 million sales in the 70s. So part of the answer is the price of new cars. Who has the financial means to pay a new car 35,000 or 40,000 euros? And those who have the means don't feel like buying a very expensive car, because in the old days it was a status symbol, meant you were successful and rich. But nowadays people put their values elsewhere. And well, still Stellantis has a wonderful operational margin because they work with professionals, but still they don't sell so many cars to private households. And other slides, the use cost. Now, nearly 70% of French people complain that using a car is expensive. Indeed, fuel is expensive. It's not explosive, a good joke, but they are indeed, fuel is increasing, but you can see that depending on the country, households have a different type of budget. The Austrian have a larger budget, but a lot of households, you shouldn't remember, need several cars. You see, for example, in my house, in my home, my wife has a car, my eldest son has a car. Okay, let's get to that slide now. Continuous. I still have a minute. Okay. This is the development, the evolution in the expenses of the average French household. Constraints, rent, internet, etc. Then you have the in green what you have to spend blue pleasurable expenses, and in red what you have to spend, transport, etc. People increasingly spend money for their rent or their subscriptions, but what they have left to buy fuel and to buy food is decreasing in proportion. That's why the French feel that they have less and less money, and that is why the budgets have a problem, because for some people it's more important to buy a sofa, for example, than a car. Well, anyway, since people buy less and less new cars, the fleet is aging, and I think it is a structural trend. On average, a car in France is 10.5 years old, and I think it will worsen in the next few years, and so the French will be keeping their cars longer and longer, so the repair market will be extremely important. Here, just to show you how structural it is, I put here the pre-committed and constrained expenses, and as to leisure, the trend remains the same. People want to leave to go on vacation, but the constrained expenses, those compulsory expenses, are increases, and that's why the ones for which you have a little more leeway tend to decrease. Thank you very much, Flavien. That was extremely interesting. Now, am I going to attempt to give the floor again to Alain LANDEC? So, okay, constrained environment, purchasing power, problems, and so people feel more and more constrained. Well, actually, the idea to have a distribution brand was to, well, it was actually a defensive idea to compete against independent distributors, for example, producing a battery. But it's not what the consumer needs. If you consider the lower middle class or lower classes, the constrained expenses, as they are called, are much higher in proportion. You can see that they have even older cars than cars of 10 years of age, and when they have to have it repaired, it's really a very significant expense. So repair centers will be very interested in those reuse parts. I heard that people who were interested in high premium brands buy a lot from plants, from outlets, you know. They don't want to have they didn't want to have private labels. They wanted to have premium brands, but things are changing, and Isotech, ISO distribution, etc. are now responding in a more structured way, a more efficient way to meet the requirements of the consumers. So I think that, in a nutshell, that the share of label brands, private labels, will increase, and we have demonstrated at FEDA that even with a lot of electric vehicles in 2035, we'll have more than 70% thermal engine cars, but they will all be very old cars. So I think that the private label market and the circular economy products have really a bright future. Stéphane, we wanted to discuss Isotechs It is successful in France. Is it exported? Do we need one or several private labels if you want to tackle the European market? Yes, first of all, Isotech is very successful. As Alain pointed out, there's a higher demand for high-quality parts at a more reasonable price. This is due to the aging of the fleet and pressure on the purchasing power, households exerting a pressure on their garage and themselves putting the pressure on us, but we have found a solution, and we've found companies which had initiated private label approaches. So we are adapting. And so the trend up until now was to keep the brands, the distributors, the private labels that had been launched. It's not really a secret to say that usually the products are the same as under the Isotech brand in France. And as to Isotech, we are going to launch it progressively in the countries where we are present. It's part of our basic strategy in all the countries where we are present. What about you, Christophe? Private labels and for parts, is it something you've done for a long time, everywhere in all countries? Well, just 2 points. Coming back to that very good analysis we just heard, I think that the media, analysts and the state should stop worrying the end consumer on the fact that everybody will have to have an electric car in 2035. I think that we still have a future for thermal engine cars. Indeed, the fleet is aging, but even though we have to change the way we consume, the way we repair cars, we will still, as distributors, remain there. It's, it's like the films we made for Point S. Instead of educating people, we wanted to tell all sorts of consumers, the retired lady, the young lady driving her kids to school, and the truck driver. We wanted to tell them all that consumers will always need a car, and we know it. Now, we are a network which, in terms of brand image and in terms of brands offered, is rather a premium brand. So we are suffering from the problems people have with money, with budget, but we are endeavoring to remain at a premium level. Number two, we're favoring private label over low cost. We have entry prices in the winter, in the summer. We have those prices for the Point S brand, even in Canada and other countries. But how many do you sell? How many tires, private label tires, do you sell over the world? Several millions. But we limit the private label share. We don't sell too many of those private label tires. I think that food is something you can't compare automobile and food, because food is absolutely essential, and automobile comes far later in their priorities. Private label means that it is a brand, but it is another brand. Some private labels do not have a brand, are not coupled with a brand. But with the private label, we want to show what our brand is about for tires, for parts. Alain, did you want to add something? I agree with you, but I think that consumers are changing. Actually, people see things differently. People, especially, in the countryside, in small villages, they're totally obsessed with money, spending the least possible money. They're buying second-hand clothes, used clothes. So they're totally changing their mindset. And the first distribution part was made by the Compagnie Européenne d'Accumulateurs, and it was a point S battery. And I wanted to tell you that little story. Well, okay. Yes. Guy-Olivier. Yes, I'd like to come back to the MOTRIO private label. We are not a private label. We are a manufacturer producing a part for customers. Well, our private label has been existing for 25 years, and we created it 25 years ago to solve the manufacturer's problem, to help manufacturers not lose any market share. So it was a response we gave to, we brought to the problem of a manufacturer, and we turned it into an offering, going up from 5,000 to 12,000 different parts. We used to cover 80% of the fleet in France and 40% of the fleet in Europe. Now we cover 50% of the fleet in Europe, and we'll cover a much larger share than that before the end of 2025 everywhere in Europe. So it's a lot more difficult than just a private label. We're a big machine and we can't do just anything. We have to be very careful about the parts we're proposing. Private label has to be a good quality brand. It's not a low-cost price. We are, on tier 2 in terms of requirements. So we want to supply to respond to the requirements of the customer. We know that they have budget constraints. They can't pay more than a certain sum of money. They need to be supported in our network. So we use that private label everywhere. And we give ourselves the permission to use remanufacturing. It's like in a coffee shop. First of all, we can offer the initial part, the original part, and then the private label, and then the remanufactured part, depending on the case. Thank you very much, Guy-Olivier.
Mais il y a aussi sur la pièce une autre.
Well, still about parts, there is an issue which is availability. The past 2 years have shown that this is an acute issue, and maybe there's a way to pay those parts at a lower price, in particular with the idea of pooling together parts from equipment manufacturers and others worldwide. I'm sorry, we are short in time. If you want to know everything about market parts, I asked him, and he has organized a stand at L120, 120. That's where you can get more answers. Well, in any case, I'm very pleased to attend this session. We were established in 2019. We have a team in Lyon, a full team in Chennai, in India also, and by the end of the year we shall have a team in the US. So in fact we start from a digital, let's say, store, where in fact equipment manufacturers do deposit their stocks. We actually make those parts visible, so to speak, and we are, well, the customers of market parts are only distributors and sellers, are both distributors and equipment manufacturers. We are not talking to garages, we are talking, so to speak, to those who buy and store. Now, then you have the distributors, whether the size or concentration level. Well, I've seen what you said about concentration process in Europe. Some of them already work with market parts. Well, in fact, up to 8% of what is being asked for in the morning is generally missing. So what we do is to make sure that, well, stocks are available, generally not far away, and can be delivered within acceptable deadlines, acceptable for the market. So it's a sort of a B2B market, so that while the service is fully free of charge for distributors, only fee for each transaction. On the platform, we have 30,000 distributors who are listed. They have an account and covering 129 countries. Well, of course, 70% of our activity is still in Europe, but it's going to, I mean, a little bit more balanced when we develop in the US and Asia. So is that tier 2 or premium, and can you play on prices, or is it just a matter of availability? Well, I come from a B2C world in the automotive spare parts, and our main argument was the price. But since the COVID, the main argument, taking into account the ability for the large manufacturers to respond, well, I think that availability is now very important. Now, but large organizations have also their logistics in place, and they are powerful. These are powerful logistics systems. Well, none of my neighbors to my left don't want to have too many stocks, and at the same time, they want to be able to respond to customer needs. And the person in between, that's us. If you have too much stocks in stock, then you're losing out. If you don't have enough parts, then you can lose out if the customer can't buy. And we are here to provide, in fact, the response through the digital system. Well, just one remark. Well, the stocks we have meet, I would say, 90% of the customers' needs. So the customer comes and wants to have a part by the end of the day, and we are able to respond properly to 90% of the cases. While people would generally know that it was going to take maybe 2 or 3 days, and they tend to accept that deadline. But then availability for such parts, exceptional parts, is that necessary to justify having an intermediary? Well, I'm wondering. So delivering 4 times per day, that of course is an issue, but having to wait to be delivered every 4 days, that's also another issue. But increasingly distributors are turning to us to avoid the shortages, and they accept to get the parts within 2 or 3 days. That's an issue I have also been considering. In the end, well, you need to make a promise to the final customer that you will be able to deliver the parts at a given point in time, and you want to make sure that you are not mistaken. So parts might be stored in Poland, in Italy, in Spain, and it's not just special parts or strange parts. No, in fact, for some parts, well, some companies might say, well, my desirable stock level would be 80, but I currently have 15. But you don't know exactly when you are going to sell the 15. And the average basket, not including tires, in fact, tends to be 70 euros. For market parts, the average basket is 20,000 euros. You know, the distributor would buy more. In fact, the garage operator is not our customers. So we are here to work with the distributors, to serve distributors, And very much like what happened with the B2C and the digital, will help develop this business. So shortages on the one hand, and then you have the information telling you that parts are available here and there, and therefore we're not actually competing with distributors. In fact, we're just helping them to have, I would say, reasonable stockpiles. Well, thank you.
Je vous invite, Christophe.
Christophe.
Je vous libère. Moi, maintenant, j'ai 2 micros.
Voilà, on va entamer la troisième
We're
et
going
dernière
to
partie de
move
cette
to the third and last part of this session, dealing with electrification.
Matthieu Simon,
And I'm going to call on
qui va nous faire
Matthieu
une super
Simon,
présentation.
partners,
Auparavant, je voudrais juste préciser que en termes d'électrification, la vitesse
I would like to say that the penetration rate in the market is comparatively slow, but the change is a reality. Repairers have therefore to stand ready to deal with these electric vehicles.
Je ne t'en voudrais pas. Donc les réparateurs doivent se tenir prêts à accueillir ces véhicules dans les
So they
ateliers.
have to be ready.
Si cette première vitesse est enclenchée chez les concessionnaires, elle doit être
Well, the
prise également pour les
dealerships
réparateurs indépendants.
have already started, and the independent repairers need also to go in that direction. What about the support to the networks with regard to the electric vehicles? How repairers can add this service? Is it profitable, and within which deadline can they integrate this service in their usual business? Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to be quite fast, knowing that we are late. Since I'm a consultant, I'm going to move very quickly. A few words.
Alors quand je défile les slides, ça revient en arrière. C'est étonnant.
Oh, it's quite surprising.
Je vais essayer d'arriver à la page d'après.
I have difficulties moving forward.
Ouais, celle-là est sympa, mais on peut, je pense, la passer. Voilà, super.
Well,
Alors,
that's the one I was
beaucoup de choses
looking
déjà
for.
ont été dites. En fait,
Plenty of things have been said already, therefore I'm not going to be repeating
si on remet la slide
all of that.
jusque ma tête,
If
en fait,
you
on verra des chiffres intéressants. Et moi, j'ai tenu à commencer par ça pour montrer un
I
petit peu
just wanted to start with this slide, these statistics, to just illustrate the way we perceive the market evolution in Europe. We started from the overall market, I mean aftermarket market in Europe, including parts, labor and margins. 200 billion, that's in fact the size of the market, and it was disrupted somehow by the COVID, but that's an exceptional situation. Over the past 20 years, in fact, aftermarket never decreased, except for the COVID period, because in fact people had to stay home, and this was lasting, and it was, I mean, nation or globally, nationwide or globally. So, and then it bounced back to 2021 and then 2022. So again, compared to what prevailed in 2019. In 2022, the market continued to grow with, and the fleet, we represent 38 million in France, maybe 300 million in Europe, and the fleet of vehicles is actually being used, so covering a lot of mileage, and this means that more visits to garages, and the average expenditure during visits has also been growing. So back to the basics, so to speak, and then inflation. Well, inflation is not just technological, it's in fact linked to the macroeconomic situation. Over the past 20 to 30 years, we have seen that vehicle prices have been increasing, and this also applied to the aftermarket.
Je suis magicien de la télécommande. Avant même qu'elle soit macroéconomique, elle était bien
even before macroeconomy, all of that in fact was due to the technologies. The technologies were the electrical, electronic, they have been added, and this contributed to increasing the prices. 2022, the inflation was 10%. 2023, well, we're almost at the end of 2023, and we would expect approximately 5% growth, and here again, partly due to inflation, and inflation is going to be comparatively reasonable between 2 to 3%. So, but the issue is how prices are going to be impacted by inflation.
Donc sans doute plus raisonné de l'ordre de 3-6%. Ensuite, jusqu'à 2025 et 2030, je pense que Christophe disait tout à l'heure, en effet, il y a des gens qui disent que le véhicule est fini, que l'aftermarket vit des heures très sombres. Nous, chez Berger, on n'est pas du tout de cet avis-là. Le véhicule, on en aura besoin dans 30 ans, dans 50 ans encore, pour des questions de mobilité, sauf quand on est dans certains centres très très urbains dans lesquels les mobilités douces peuvent exister, mais c'est quand même pas le cas du commun des mortels. Et par ailleurs, l'aftermarket, nous, on croit fermement qu'il y a des belles heures devant lui, parce que il y a un car park,
there is rather a bright future. The fleet is stable and even growing, linked to the demographics, and also the durability of vehicles can have a sort of life expectancy of 20 or 25 years. And then the price effect. Prices will continue to increase. Technologies will be used widely in vehicles.
Sur cette deuxième slide,
on this second
on a
slide,
quelques-unes des tendances
we have
un petit peu majeures
some
qui
of the major
percutent quelque
trends
part l'après-vente. L'après-vente, on dit toujours, quelque part, c'est un mouvement tectonique qui prend beaucoup de temps. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on est sur une cohorte de véhicules qui évolue un peu rapidement. L'âge moyen du parc est entre 11 et 12 ans aujourd'hui en France. Donc on a le temps avant de voir des changements profonds arriver. Néanmoins, depuis 6, 12, 18 mois, on voit des changements un peu plus rapides se produire. Donc à gauche, vous avez les tendances conjoncturelles, à droite, les tendances plutôt moyen-long terme, un peu plus structurelles. Alors les tendances, j'ai commencé à en parler à gauche. Il y a déjà l'inflation. Il y a des perturbations de la supply chain, donc de l'approvisionnement des pièces, pour parler français, qui sont liées aux ruptures d'approvisionnement, qui sont liées aux pénuries, qui sont donc liées aux surstocks, dont parlait je crois Christophe tout à l'heure, les surstocks qui sont matériels et significatifs dans la chaîne. Il y a également l'augmentation de la marque de distributeur, on en a largement parlé depuis tout à l'heure, et la marque de distributeur, elle est vraie en automobile comme dans d'autres produits, Alain le rappelait. Et puis, il y a l'émergence du sujet de la sustainability. Alors, ça fait un petit peu tarte à la crème comme ça quand on dit, mais en vérité, c'est aussi vrai. Alors, ça se matérialise avec quelques facteurs. Le premier, c'est les pièces, les fameuses pièces issues de l'économie circulaire qui répondent à la fois aux besoins écologiques
circular economy.
par les clients,
This
par les
is
assureurs,
what some
aussi, en
of
fait,
the customers or insurers are asking for.
Ça peut, la sustainability, se
And that
matérialiser par des
sustainability
transports
can
plus
also
raisonnés, du
be
kilométrage à vide
reflected
mieux
with
optimisé, qui va aussi
reasoned
répondre à des questions
transport
économiques.
system.
À droite,
this,
vous avez
at the same
quelques-unes des
time,
tendances
meets a
structurelles.
number of,
La première, c'est pour ça
economic
qu'on m'a demandé
concerns.
d'intervenir, c'est l'électrification.
Then
Alors
electrification, that's where I
l'électrification, un mot
need to
là-dessus,
talk.
c'est évidemment l'éléphant dans la salle, comme on dit.
Well,
Donc, on sait tous que les véhicules deviennent
everybody
électriques.
knows that
J'ai
vehicles
été
are
tout
getting
à l'heure,
more and
comme
more
sans doute
electric.
certains d'entre vous, me
And,
balader dans les allées,
I
on
have
voit
been
plein de véhicules
walking
très électriques, très
in the
électrifiés
corridors and I
dans le
can
salon de
see
nos véhicules.
vehicles,
Oui, mais en
in
fait,
particular new
il
vehicles
faut avoir en
which
tête plusieurs choses. Il faut
in
avoir en
fact
tête
electric
petit 1 que
vehicles. But you have
l'arrivée
still
dans les
to
ventes
bear in mind
réelles
that
est quand même progressive.
well,
Petit 2 que l'arrivée dans
sales
le
are
parc
increasing
de facto est quand
gradually,
même encore plus
and
progressive parce que
well, in
évidemment on a
terms of
une espèce
fleet
de phénomène de
and
résistance et de cohorte dans le parc.
garages,
Et de
it's
nouveau
here
l'âge moyen
again.
est de 11 à 12 ans, donc avant que ça percole dans le parc, il
Slow,
faut
it
un peu
will
de temps.
take, in fact,
Et
maybe
petit
10 to
3, la
11
plupart
years
des personnes
before
qui sont sur cette table ronde ici assises
cars
représentent
bought today
l'independent
would actually
aftermarket,
be
donc la partie
serving the
indépendante du marché.
aftermarket
Donc adresse plutôt les
market.
véhicules de plus de 5
So,
ans, c'est le cas
I
de
think that
Christophe, c'est
this
le cas de Stéphane,
market
c'est le cas aussi
actually
de Guy,
addresses
puisqu'il est
vehicles
chez
of
MOTRIO.
5 years or more.
Donc là aussi, on a encore plus de temps.
And here again,
Enfin,
I think we
le
still
véhicule
have
électrique,
time.
je tords
And
peut-être
last
beaucoup
but
à
not
l'idée
least,
un peu reçue qu'on a.
the
Oui, un véhicule
electric
électrique, ça a moins de
vehicles,
maintenance. C'est
well,
évident. Il y a
that
des choses qui
requires
disparaissent, des
less
choses qui
maintenance because number of
diminuent.
things
Donc les
have been
filtres, les huiles,
removed,
etc. On sait tout
like
ça.
filters,
On estime
the
chez Berger, c'est à peu
oil,
près 20%, 25%,
so
peut-être
which
en moins.
represents maybe
Maintenant, il n'y a pas que
20%
du négatif, il y a aussi
of
du positif, il y a des choses
repair
nouvelles qui
activities.
arrivent,
But
des produits, des
there are new
services,
things
et en
that
particulier
are
liés
added
à la batterie, parce que
and
un
linked
véhicule
to the
électrique,
battery.
on peut penser,
One
c'est pas encore, mais on peut
might
penser qu'un véhicule électrique, ça
think
va vivre
that an
aussi, pas simplement
electric
5 ans,
vehicle
mais
is
peut-être
going
15, 20, 25 ans, on
have
verra
a
bien.
life expectancy not
Et
of
à un moment
5 years,
donné,
but
comme un
maybe
smartphone, il
10
va falloir
or
se poser
20
des
years.
questions typiquement sur la
And
batterie. Comment
very
on fait
much
pour que la
like with
batterie
your
ait toujours une autonomie
smartphones,
suffisante,
well, you
entre
want
autres.
to know
Donc,
later,
on aura cette
think about
question-là,
how to
et ce qui est
extend your
intéressant, c'est
battery's
que
life.
l'aftermarket par rapport aux ventes de véhicules neufs à 10, 15 ans pour se poser ces questions et se préparer, et préparer les amis garages en fait, au bout des choses. Autre tendance structurelle, le digital et la data, Christophe en parlait aussi, c'est une tendance majeure. Pourquoi? Parce que bien sûr, nous tous consommateurs en premier lieu, on a envie d'avoir les mêmes facilités d'usage dans le monde professionnel que dans le monde particulier. Et ça se traduit par plein de choses. C'est de l'achat en ligne avec Oscaro, c'est du booking en ligne avec les garages ou avec Fixter, c'est tout simplement la connectivité des véhicules de plus en plus qui commence à arriver, je dis bien commence, mais qui va devenir une réalité aussi, qui va permettre de la prédictive ou préventive maintenance, c'est-à-dire quelques bulletins de santé qui vont vous dire quand est-ce que vous allez pouvoir aller changer tel ou tel test. Il y a l'arrivée du leasing, on va rester sur cette page, mais oui, l'arrivée du leasing, je pense que tout à l'heure, dans l'Observatoire Cetelem, Flavien disait, j'essaie de me dépêcher, mais je ne peux vraiment pas parler plus vite. Je peux couper un mot sur deux. L'arrivée du leasing, pourquoi? Parce qu'on voit bien que c'est une question d'offre et de demande. Côté demande, pourquoi? Les véhicules, il y a quand même un prix moyen qui augmente, et Flavien montrait très justement, il y a une courbe en ciseaux, comme on dit, avec un écart qui se creuse entre le salaire médian des Français ou des Européens et le prix moyen d'un véhicule comparable, 205, 206, 207, 208, etc. Et donc le leasing répond en partie à ça, parce que si ce n'est acheter toujours un véhicule en le payant en cash ou en crédit, on peut aussi le leaser. Et le leaser répond par ailleurs à une demande des clients qui est non seulement j'ai un véhicule, c'est un véhicule statutaire si je puis dire, mais je peux l'utiliser pour 3 jours, pour 1 mois, pour 3 ans. Et donc ça va arriver. Ça pose des questions pour l'aftermarket. Pourquoi? Parce que ça veut dire que derrière il faut arriver à organiser en fait l'aftermarket qui va avec, quand on le lise pour 1 an, pour 2 ans, pour 3 ans ou plus. Enfin les alliances. Moi, ce qui me frappe, et j'en conclurai par là sur cette slide, ce qui me frappe, c'est qu'on est dans un monde qui devient un petit peu plus mixte, un peu plus fongible entre les frontières qu'on avait entre le monde constructeur OI et le monde indépendant. Et donc on voit bien qu'il y a des initiatives les uns les autres. Guy, je pense, en est un bon représentant. Hugues, tout à l'heure, mentionnait quelques possibilités futures. Et puis on voit aussi les constructeurs chinois qui sont là, qui sont juste à côté, et qui vont aussi demander en fait also, they will be asking for partnership to be developed, particularly for the repair activities. I'm going to skip some of the pages I had added just to make my presentation look nice. Well, maybe a few words and then it will be time for me to conclude. J'en conclus parce que les scénarios qu'on voit sont multiples en fait.
They are multiple scenarios.
Voilà. Les scénarios qu'on voit sont multiples et quand on essaie de projeter à quoi peut ressembler l'après-vente du futur en 2030, 2035, c'est un exercice assez ardeux dont on reviendrait, mais on essaie d'imaginer différents phénomènes. Et les phénomènes, j'essaie de les expliquer en 4 scénarios qui ne sont pas forcément exclusifs les uns des autres. Il y a un premier phénomène qui est, on va assister en bas à gauche, comme disait Hugues, à une poursuite de la consolidation.
La consolidation issue of consolidation at a European level, or I would even say transcontinental consideration, so between the US and the European countries, and then you have the Chinese, Alibaba, for example, Amazon.
So, en point 2, les constructeurs qui vont
manufacturers are going to strike back, so to speak. They will be resorting to warranty extensions, new leasing approaches, and vehicles connectivity. And then you have digital players, larger and smaller, startups or not, and then you have the big barbarians. Now, so you can see that all of that is becoming reality, but gradually, and I think that's time for me to conclude. Well, I would like to react to what has been presented, more mega alliances, cooperations, or more convergence. Well, would you tend to agree with what has just been stated? In order to face it or to counter the barbarians, the digital barbarians. So, what do you think about the scenario? Well, I would like to react to what Matthieu has been saying. We're not talking here about external growth. Our job is to come up with solutions, and cooperation is part of it. This is important for external growth, and we're also trying to focus on core growth. with regard to the electrification of the fleet, this means that we'll have to be more digital. We are already somewhat digital, including in our stores and in our workshops. And so we need to come up with new solutions for the customers, but that again is nothing new. This has been a reality for us over the past 15 years, and we are just in the process of getting, adapting. It would be simple to find solutions together rather than fighting each other, knowing that the market is shrinking. But the Meta Alliance also means that you would have to change your mindsets. Yes, indeed, mindsets will have to change. People have to think differently. Our market is one of the most difficult and in which people are not willing to invest. So that's the reason why leasing is developing. And a small garage, for example, would not be able to face, in fact, what is expected of him. So if the garage is not properly organized, it's going to be difficult when everything gets digital.
Alors, je vais me remettre dans un métier que j'avais avant, qui était diriger un groupement. Et quand je rencontrais mes réparateurs et mes distributeurs, je leur disais l'avenir de la distribution, c'est la réparation. Et donc, il faut inventer des métiers et des services chez les réparateurs. Et pour le compte, je me souviens avoir inventé une structure qui était un cabinet de courtage d'assurance, parce que je pensais que dans les garages, on pouvait vendre à la fois des assurances pour les véhicules, mais aussi des assurances pas de mécanique si on faisait une réparation.
In garages, that's in fact acting like a broker. If you, for example, repair or sell, in fact, a used vehicle, to provide the guarantee for such a vehicle. With regard to electric vehicles, we also agree that there would be fewer repairs on the electric vehicles compared to the internal combustion engines. Even though electric vehicles, even though the new vehicles represented 100% of sales, then there will still be no less than 70% of internal combustion engines in our fleet. So therefore, we need to really always assess and see whether what we had forecast has come true. Our garages will continue to make business with the current vehicles, internal combustion ones, but they have to bear in mind that within 10 years they would have to grow in other businesses. So the businesses will be supported, in fact, by the internal combustion engine vehicles. But, well, having said this, we are talking about planning to cope with the electrification process.
Pour nous permettre, peut-être avec Stéphane, de dire deux mots. Non, pas plus, Alain, s'il te plaît. Juste deux choses.
Maybe,
la première, électrique, c'est acquis. Qu'on veuille, qu'on ne veuille pas, qu'on ne pense pas,
electric vehicles, that's now a fact.
Donc ça veut dire qu'il faut que les réparateurs s'organisent
pour aborder
ce nouveau mode d'utilisation des véhicules. Deuxièmement, chez Point S, on a pris le problème peut-être différemment. Parce qu'il y a des produits, des services et des produits qui vont nous permettre de remplacer les pièces qu'on ne fera plus. Je prends deux exemples. Les bornes et le recyclage des batteries. Alors, ils sont pour l'instant pas assez évolués à notre sens. C'est vrai que dans notre réseau, par exemple, on ne s'est pas avancé à préconiser des bornes de recharge pour l'instant, parce qu'on estime que le marché n'est pas mature. Et le recyclage des batteries, par contre, on y pense fortement. Et puis deuxième prise entre guillemets, de réseau Point S en France et dans le monde sur l'arrivée de l'électrique, on est en train de tenter de se lier avec des accords de partenariat avec des fabricants asiatiques, parce que là c'est également le même combat. On peut dire aujourd'hui on va verrouiller, l'Europe va verrouiller, la France aussi, et ils ne rentreront pas, mais ils rentreront tôt ou tard, mais ils rentreront. Donc autant anticiper, c'est notre sentiment, notre position. Et on commence à se lier avec des accords fabricants, à la fois bien sûr pour l'entretien et la réparation de leurs véhicules,
So we would have to develop cooperation on how to repair
their
vehicles
C'est aussi pour ça qu'on s'est lancé nous sur la
that's the reason why we have started selling cars.
Il faut qu'on accélère. Moi,
But I think we need to speed up.
Que Philippe intervienne sur les ZBE en
sur les
Belgique,
ZBE,
parce qu'on avait un sujet. Voilà, exactement. On avait un sujet sur la ZFE.
Et Stéphane Antiglio.
Stéphane also would then be able to summarize all of that.
Il y a des préalables.
Not everything is electric. There are things that need to be done before we can actually fully electric.
Puisqu'on avait un sujet sur ce thème. Alain LANDEC dit que les ZFE sont un sujet qui brutalise l'histoire, mais on va dedans. Ça, c'est ce que tu as dit à Carrosserie de l'entretien. Voilà, j'aimerais que Philippe rebondisse parce que Philippe, en Belgique, chez Traxio, vous avez peut-être une solution
back in Belgium, in particular within Traxio, maybe have a solution to attract those vehicles which are not wanted within ZVE. Well, you know, we have regions in Belgium who do not speak to each other, and currently we have 3 zones. You have, in fact, Brussels, Antwerp, and Gand. Rules are not the same, at least not exactly the same. And then, in principle, all the Wallon area, that is, in fact, half of the territory, will be a low-emission zone.
Toutefois, dans cette, et c'est le travail qu'on fait maintenant, on a mis un nouveau projet sur la table.
We have a project in place so that as part of the proposal, legislative proposal, there will be a sort of a waiver, a derogation.
D'un degré environnemental,
and to take into account the extent to which the vehicle is environmentally friendly. So we developed a concept which is known as eco-expert, like eco-maintenance. We are developing this concept and then implementing that in garages in Belgium. What we're asking for is that the garage operator, in particular the consumer, could be able to continue to drive their vehicles in the low emission zones once they have been certified by an eco-expert. This is beneficial for the consumer. Then we have a system which is KATSARDIS. It's like a digital file of the vehicle. Whenever you come to the garage for technical checks, mileage will be noted down, repairs that have been done will be noted. So you need to integrate in the car pass, it's known as a car pass, anything that has to be to do with batteries, for example. Everything has to be transparent and validated. And that would also mean more transparency in the used vehicle market. That's what we are currently doing. I hope that they will be listening to us in Brussels and not just at the region, but also at the level of the European institutions.
Un petit peu parce que c'est quand même le cœur du business ici. On voit beaucoup l'introduction de concepts dans les réseaux constructeurs, mais aussi chez les indépendants multimarques. Alors, ça
then
parle
you have the multi-brand operators.
De concepts comme Nextel Drive chez AG, MOVI chez LKQ. Comment les groupements s'activent pour faire cohabiter la mixité entre moteurs thermiques et
to ensure the coexistence between electric vehicles and the combustion engine vehicles. How can they coexist? And who better than MOTRIO would be able to make a statement on that?
Ne touchera pas tout le monde.
Now, not it will not affect everyone at all times. We have the idea of remaining with one MOTRIO concept, but we won't have any proper electric MOTRIO concept. We are going to be training the people who asked to be trained. We will help them structure or tidy up their garage because they will have to sort out things differently, and we will support them to be able to do that. And we will, of course, it will not be something that every garage will need. The problem also is when you change people, you know, when you replace people. But you need to retrain people. So we will remain basic and train the right people and meet our customers' expectations. Christophe, you also signed agreements with Chinese manufacturers. Point S, yes, we have to wait for people to need maintenance, but Guy said the right thing. It is mostly about training. No network, including mine, will be ready in the next few weeks. So we'll have the hybrid cars coming in first, then the electric cars, and then we have to progress as to the training of teams. Now, today, how can you get your networks to follow you when they have to be trained on a vehicle which doesn't exist or that there are very few? Yes, it is the challenge to tell a garage owner that they have to invest into training into something that will not be needed before the next year, at least. But we have to still train them and follow and coach our garage owners so that they can be ready. Yes, it is exactly the same philosophy as AD. Stéphane, you have no particular concept. You said that the most important was to expand the network, which is already a high-quality network, because there are prerequisites to fill up, to make, and you think it'll take some time before all that is needed. Can you conclude? Yes, I think that my colleagues said that the proportion of hybrid and electric vehicles will be expanding slowly. I'm convinced that there will still be thermal engine cars in Europe in 2060. Less, but we are doing this coaching in areas where it is meaningful to raise the awareness of those AD network players, make them aware of the fact that there will be hybrid and electric vehicles, because there are also hybrid vehicles. We have to make them aware of the fact that a lot of customers have ADAS features, so there are problems as to technology, reconfiguration of a system, pass-through, gateway. So I think we have to take things in the right sequence, with the right timing, with the right, doing what is right. So it will be our conclusion. Thank you very much. That completes that session. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for your interventions. And it's up to you to conclude, Caroline. Now, I'm sorry, but I'm going to, have my little advertisement moment. I like that expression. We have here the latest, our latest publication of our European Atlas. It's a bilingual magazine, and that'll be before the next one, and we will ask you what you feel about it, and the next one will be circulated at the end of the year. Thank you very much for your attention, and enjoy your show. Thank you very much. Thank you for having shared your vision of distribution. Now we have an appointment tomorrow at 10:15 for a conference on workshop waste, and especially we'll make a focus on batteries. Thank you very much. Enjoy Équipe Auto.